The realization, cold and stark, hit me not with the force of a decision, but as a surrender. My defenses were already crumbling, my resolve a forgotten whisper, when I understood with a terrifying clarity that I couldn't stop him, didn't truly want to stop him. I wasn't intoxicated by alcohol or drugs, nor was I paralyzed by fear, not in the conventional sense. Instead, a strange, combustible stillness took hold of me. I stood there, a statue with a frantically beating heart, lips slightly parted, my skin ignited by 1,000 tiny fires. And then Arthur, my best friend Chloe's father, the man who had been a fixture in the backdrop of my adolescence, sank to his knees behind me. His voice, a low, intimate rumble that vibrated through the charged air of his study, ghosted against my ear. "Let me take care of you, Maya." He was a man sculpted by time and quiet authority, easily twice my age, a widower now after his wife Chloe's mother had lost her valiant battle years ago. My memories of him were initially framed by sun-drenched afternoons in their backyard, the scent of charcoal and grilling burgers wafting through the air during countless sleepovers. He was the comforting presence who'd materialize with pizzas and a sympathetic ear whenever high school dramas sent Chloe and me into fits of tears. He was a safe harbor, a paternal figure. But that night, ensconced within the heavy oak panels of his private study, the door locked against the unsuspecting world, the room saturated with the rich, masculine scent of his cologne, a fragrance I'd always associated with distant respect. He was different. He wasn't looking at me as Maya, Chloe's slightly lost, perpetually struggling best friend. His touch, when it finally came, wasn't that of a surrogate father. It was the touch of a man claiming something he'd decided was his. And in that searing instant, as his lips, then his tongue, traced a molten path from my hip to the impossibly sensitive skin of my inner thigh, I knew. A boundary, invisible yet profoundly significant, had been irrevocably crossed, a line etched not in sand, but in flesh and complicity. What I couldn't have possibly fathomed then was how this single desperate act of seeking solace, this favor born of my vulnerability and his veiled loneliness, would spiral into a vortex, fundamentally reordering my existence while simultaneously threatening to tear my very soul into unrecognizable fragments. My name is Maya. I was 23 years old when the earth shifted beneath my feet, when the familiar landscape of my life began to warp into something treacherous and intoxicating. I'd recently made the painful decision to drop out of nursing school. The dream of healing others had been suffocated by the relentless trinity of tuition fees I couldn't meet, bills that piled up like mocking snowdrifts, and the soul-crushing pressure to maintain the facade of someone who had her life perfectly under control. The reality was far grimmer. My days, and often nights, were spent at a greasy spoon diner clinging precariously to the side of Highway 280 just outside Birmingham, Alabama. I navigated double shifts, the smell of stale coffee and fried food clinging to me like a second skin, my smile a well-rehearsed mask for the exhaustion gnawing at my bones. On the rare nights I wasn't scraping remnants of anonymous meals off Formica tables, I'd seek refuge at Chloe's apartment. Chloe. She was a vibrant sunbeam to my muted shadow, confident where I hesitated, wild where I was tethered by anxieties, and blessed with a financial security I could only dream of. Her father, Arthur Chamberlain, was a man of considerable means, the proprietor of 3 thriving car dealerships and a sprawling rustic cabin on Logan Martin Lake, a place that had served as our clandestine teenage escape hatch more times than I could count. Arthur was the epitome of quiet power. He wore his expensive suits like bespoke armor, his words were always measured, his silver-streaked hair impeccably groomed, but it was his eyes, dark, penetrating, unsettlingly perceptive, that held you captive. They seemed to bypass polite Chloe and delve straight into your most guarded insecurities. He was a man of few words, an observer who absorbed everything. After Chloe's mother, Evelyn, succumbed to cancer, a discernible shift occurred in Arthur. The sharp edges of his grief seemed to have softened him, etching lines of sorrow around his eyes, lending him an air of brokenness, though never weakness. If anything, this vulnerability, this hint of a shared human fragility, drew people in, creating an unspoken magnetism. He didn't need to speak to command a room or to make you feel seen. I recall with painful clarity the first time his offer of help extended beyond casual paternal kindness. It was a sweltering Alabama evening. I was perched on the back porch steps of their sprawling home, a crumpled eviction notice clutched in my hand, hot tears tracing pathways through the grime on my cheeks. Chloe was inside, lost in the sanctuary of her music, headphones sealing her off from my quiet desperation. Arthur emerged from the kitchen, a chilled beer in hand. He took in my tear-streaked face, the tremor in my shoulders, and without a word, settled beside me on the steps. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the chirping of crickets and my ragged breaths. Then, his voice, calm and even. "You're drowning, Maya. Let me throw you a rope." That month he covered my rent. Covered. The next month followed suit. A week later, he presented me with a reliable, if slightly dated car from one of his dealerships, a lifeline that liberated me from the tyranny of Birmingham's unreliable public transport. Then came the offer of a job, a position at the front desk of his main dealership office. It was a world away from the diner, a chance to breathe cleaner air, to feel a flicker of professional dignity. This, I realize now, was the true genesis of the favor. But favors from men like Arthur Chamberlain, men who move through the world with an ingrained sense of entitlement and an arsenal of resources, rarely come without a hidden heat, an unspoken expectation. The incident that irrevocably altered our trajectory happened one evening, long after the dealership had emptied of staff and customers. I was in his opulent wood-paneled study, ostensibly organizing year-end financial statements. I reached for a file, and my pen slipped from my grasp, skittering onto his massive mahogany desk. I bent to retrieve it, a mundane, thoughtless action. When I straightened, he was there, standing directly behind me, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, his breath a faint, disturbingly intimate caress on the sensitive skin of my nape. "You're a beautiful woman, Maya," he murmured, his voice a silken caress that sent a jolt, part fear, part illicit thrill, through my system. I froze, every nerve ending alive and screaming. It was the first time he'd ever uttered words that strayed so far from the path of platonic concern. I turned my head slightly, my eyes meeting his in the dim light. His hand, large and sure, was already resting on the curve of my waist, his thumb stroking a slow, deliberate circle. 1,000 alarm bells should have screamed. I should have voiced a protest, pulled away, created distance, but a strange paralysis, a terrifying cocktail of gratitude, loneliness, and a deeply buried desire to be truly seen, to be wanted, held me captive. Instead of recoiling, I found myself leaning almost imperceptibly back into his touch. I let it happen. I allowed the carefully constructed walls I'd built around myself to be dismantled, brick by brick, by his practiced hands. I let him undress me, slowly, reverently, as if unwrapping a precious gift. I let him touch me in ways, in places, that had been dormant and untouched for years, reawakening sensations I'd forgotten I was capable of feeling, and with a shame that mingled disturbingly with an overwhelming sense of release, I let myself feel good. Impossibly, damnably good. That night, as his lips charted a course down my body, as his touch sought to exorcise every ounce of shame and insecurity I carried, I knew with a profound, gut-wrenching certainty that something fundamental had shifted. The dynamic between us was no longer that of benefactor and recipient, of surrogate father and daughter's friend. It was something far more elemental, more dangerous, but even in the intoxicating haze of that encounter, a sliver of cold premonition pierced through. Something dark was coming, something that would make me question every choice, every motive, and ultimately whether I ever truly possessed any control at all. What twisted bargain had I stumbled into? And how long before the carefully constructed dam of secrets burst? If you've ever found yourself in a situation where gratitude slowly morphs into obligation, or where a helping hand begins to feel like a gilded cage, share your experiences in the comments below. Your stories give voice to the unspoken, and sometimes that's the first step towards understanding. I wish I could tell you that was the extent of it, a single regrettable lapse in judgment, a moment of weakness that dissolved into the quiet shame of the morning after, leaving me to walk away, bruised but ultimately untouched by lasting consequence. But that would be a comforting lie. The truth, far more complicated and far more damning, is that I walked back into his orbit, into his arms, into his bed, again and again. The pull was too strong, the illusion of care too seductive for my starved soul. The morning after that first night, a text message illuminated my phone screen. "Arthur, come by the lake house." Just us. It wasn't a request nor an apology. It was a command, cloaked in the guise of an invitation, and I, like a woman mesmerized, obeyed without question. The key was waiting for me, as instructed, tucked discreetly beneath a loose stone by the side entrance. Inside, the sprawling cabin was silent, yet alive with his presence. A guest room had been prepared, the bed adorned with crisp, immaculate white sheets. A luxurious silk robe, a size that fit me with an unnerving perfection, was laid out. When he appeared, emerging from the shadows of the great room, and touched me again, this time in the unforgiving clarity of daylight, with the sun streaming through the large picture windows overlooking the water, it felt exponentially more dangerous, more real, more irreversible. What had begun as one stolen, illicit night under the cloak of office anonymity quickly escalated into a pattern of clandestine weekend getaways. The lake house became our illicit sanctuary. The financial assistance continued, no longer framed as benevolent help, but as part of our unspoken arrangement. He sent substantial sums of money to my account. My outstanding nursing school loans, a crushing weight that had dictated so many of my desperate choices, were quietly paid off. My wardrobe underwent a transformation. New clothes, designer shoes, expensive perfumes appeared as if by magic, gifts from a man who seemed to derive a certain satisfaction from molding me into his image of a desirable woman. He was providing me with a lifestyle I could never have achieved on my own, a gilded cage I was willingly, at least initially, stepping into. And in return, I surrendered every part of myself to him, my body, my time, my complicity. Chloe, my dearest friend, the unwitting casualty in this unfolding drama, remained blissfully ignorant. In her eyes, her father was simply extending his characteristic generosity, helping her struggling best friend find her footing in a harsh world. She'd even joke, with an innocence that now twisted like a knife in my gut, about how I was practically a second daughter to him, a permanent fixture in their family. If only she knew, if only she could have glimpsed the truth, that her father had committed to memory the taste of my skin, the sound of my sighs, the geography of my body. Initially, the secrecy itself was a potent aphrodisiac. The inherent risk, the constant tightrope walk of lies and near discoveries, the pervasive guilt. I wore these emotions like a dark, alluring perfume. Arthur, in those early days of our affair, was masterful at making me feel cherished, special. He'd whisper, that I had breathed life back into him after the desolate years following Evelyn's death. He claimed I made him feel like a man again, vital and desired, not merely a grieving widower and a preoccupied father. I clung to these words, desperately wanting to believe them, needing them to justify the compromises I was making, the betrayals I was enacting. But slowly, insidiously, the dynamic began to shift. The attentive lover started to morph into a possessive, subtly controlling benefactor. He began to exhibit a disquieting interest in my life outside of our encounters. Who was I texting? Where had I been? Casual questions at first, but they soon carried an undercurrent of interrogation. His disapproval of my close bond with Chloe became more pronounced. "Keep your distance from her for a while," he'd murmured one night, his fingers stroking my hair as I lay beside him in the lake house bed, the words a soft command. "She's too inquisitive. Asks too many questions." I'd dismissed it then as a touch of paranoia, an older man's insecurity. But then Chloe herself voiced her concerns. "You're acting so weird lately, Maya," she'd said during a rare phone call, her voice laced with genuine confusion and a hint of hurt. "It's like you're hiding something. You never come over for our girls' nights anymore. Are you seeing someone?" The lie slid from my tongue with a practiced ease that sickened me. I fabricated a story about being swamped with my new job, about focusing on online courses to eventually re-enroll in school, about being too exhausted for a social life, let alone romance. She'd laughed, a bright, unsuspecting sound. "Well, okay, Miss Focused. Just promise me you're not secretly sleeping with my dad or something," she'd joked, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She had no idea how dangerously close to the truth her jest had landed. The guilt, acrid and suffocating, rose in my throat like bile. That very night, emboldened by a potent cocktail of fear and self-loathing, I attempted to assert some semblance of control. I told Arthur, my voice trembling despite my resolve, that we needed to slow things down, to create some space. He had listened, his expression unreadable in the dim light of his study. Then his eyes, those dark, perceptive pools, hardened. "After everything I've done for you, Maya?" he'd asked, his voice a low, chilling purr, each word wrapped in silk but carrying the unmistakable weight of a threat. "After all I've given you?" He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, his movements deliberate, almost theatrical. He produced a small velvet box. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, lay a diamond bracelet, its stones winking malevolently in the lamplight. He took my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong, and fastened the cold, heavy diamonds around it. "You don't walk away from me, Maya," he stated, not as a plea, but as an unassailable fact. And I, a coward captivated by the glittering symbols of my own captivity, didn't. I stayed, even as every fiber of my being, every shred of my tattered conscience screamed for me to run, to escape before I was entirely consumed. The charade, the intricate web of lies, nearly unraveled completely one tense evening. Chloe, in an attempt to bridge the growing distance between us, had invited me for dinner. "Just the three of us, Maya, like old times," her cheerful text had read. Weeks had passed since I'd last seen her properly, my excuses becoming increasingly flimsy. Arthur had explicitly told me not to go, his possessiveness now overt. But I knew that another refusal would undoubtedly ignite Chloe's suspicions beyond mere curiosity. So with a heart full of dread and lips that trembled betrayingly, I walked into their familiar home, and there he was, Arthur. Presiding at the head of the dining table, the picture of benign paternal grace, greeting me as if I were just another casual guest, a friend of his daughter's. The normalcy of it was suffocating, but beneath the heavy linen tablecloth, a different silent drama was unfolding. As Chloe chattered animatedly about a new colleague, her laughter echoing in the strained silence that only I seemed to perceive, Arthur's foot began a slow, insidious journey up my leg. He'd make eye contact with me, a knowing, predatory gleam in his dark eyes, even as he poured wine into Chloe's glass or responded to her conversation, all the while his toes were making deliberate, suggestive contact with the inside of my thigh. I nearly choked on my water, my fork clattering against my plate. My entire body was a live wire of panic and illicit arousal. Then Chloe, oblivious, dropped the conversational bombshell. "Dad, remember that night Maya came over so late to help you with all that paperwork?"
You two were in the study for ages. What exactly were you guys working on again? Sounded super important. My mouth went bone dry.
The room seemed to shrink. Calvin just smiled, a serene, unruffled mask of composure. "Just some tedious end-of-year accounts, sweetheart. Tax documents, the usual boring stuff." He then turned his gaze fully on me, his eyes like chips of obsidian, his jaw subtly tightening, a silent dare, a warning. I managed a weak nod, a forced, ghastly replica of a smile. But I could feel the cracks spiderwebbing through the facade of my lies. One more pointed question from Chloe, one slip of my tongue, one unguarded look exchanged between Arthur and me, and the entire carefully constructed edifice would shatter into a million incriminating pieces. The final, inevitable implosion occurred 2 agonizing weeks later. I had just emerged from a shower in Arthur's master bathroom, the steam still clinging to my skin, my body imprinted with the scent of him. The diamond bracelet, my glittering shackle, sparkled on my wrist as I towel-dried my hair, my reflection in the large, ornate mirror, a stranger's face, hollow-eyed and haunted. I should have felt powerful, desired, cherished. Instead, a profound emptiness, a soul-deep hollowness, consumed me. Arthur was in the adjoining bedroom, casually dressed in a robe, scrolling through emails on his laptop, the picture of domesticity, as if our illicit arrangement was the most natural thing in the world, as if this stolen intimacy, confined to the opulent prison of his house, could ever translate into a viable reality. I was on the precipice of telling him, of finally voicing the words that had been clawing at my throat for weeks. "I can't do this anymore." When my phone, lying innocently on the marble vanity, buzzed. A text message from Chloe. "Maya, we need to talk." "Now!" My blood turned to ice. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. Before I could even attempt to formulate a response, my phone rang, her name flashing on the screen. I answered, my voice a barely audible croak. "Maya?" Chloe's voice was uncharacteristically shaky, thin with a pain that lanced through me. I went through Dad's phone." "I know you'll say I shouldn't have, but I had this awful feeling. I saw the messages, Maya, the hotel receipts, the pictures." A strangled sob escaped her. "You were in his bed, Kim. My father's bed." Silence. A vast, echoing void where words should have been. My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. There were no excuses left, no plausible lies, no clever deflections. Only the brutal, unadorned truth, stripped bare and exposed in all its ugliness. "I trusted you," she whispered, each word a tiny, perfectly aimed dart. "You were my best friend, my sister." Her voice broke. "And all this time, you were screwing my dad, behind my back." Then the click. She hung up. That was the last time Chloe ever spoke to me. She blocked my number, erased me from her social media, effectively severing the deepest, most significant friendship of my life. A cryptic tweet she posted shortly after, alluding to betrayal and broken trust, ignited our mutual friend circle like a wildfire. Whispers mutated into screenshots, passed around with salacious glee. Secrets, once shared in confidence, became fuel for public judgment. The fallout was swift and brutal. I lost other friends, acquaintances distanced themselves, and the job at Arthur's dealership, my supposed lifeline, vanished overnight. I had lost the only person who had ever truly felt like home, and Arthur. His transformation was equally swift, equally chilling. Once Chloe's discovery blew our affair wide open, he distanced himself with the practiced detachment of a seasoned politician sidestepping a career-ending scandal. Suddenly, we needed space. He needed to protect his image, his reputation, his precious dealerships. I should lay low, disappear, become invisible until the storm passed. And just like that, the steady flow of money ceased. The lavish gifts stopped appearing. The invitations to the lake house, our illicit haven, dried up. The soft promises whispered in the dark, the declarations of how special I was, how I'd saved him from his grief, all evaporated into the suffocating silence of his abandonment. He had used me, and I, in my desperate hunger for comfort, for validation, for a distorted semblance of love I'd never found in the right places or from the right people, had allowed it. I had mistaken the intoxicating allure of his focused attention for genuine care. I had confused the primal heat of lust for the enduring warmth of affection. And by the time I could finally discern the stark, painful difference, it was irrevocably too late. Rock bottom arrived a month later, unceremonious and bleak. I was back at the diner, the clatter of plates and the smell of stale grease once again my daily reality. Back to relying on meager tips to survive, no degree to my name. No best friend to confide in, no man to offer even the illusion of security, just a crushing, all-consuming shame. But somewhere in that abyss of despair, something within me began to shift. That shame, that raw, festering wound, I started to alchemize it. I turned it into fuel. With a grim determination I hadn't known I possessed, I re-enrolled in a community college, taking online classes, paying every single dime myself through sheer hard work and sacrifice. I sought therapy, tentative at first, then embracing the painful but necessary process of excavating my own complicity, my own vulnerabilities. I found healing, not in forgiveness from others, but in forgiving myself. I began, slowly, to tell my story, not as a victim defined by her mistakes, but as a woman who had learned, in the hardest way imaginable, that some favors, some perceived acts of salvation come with a price tag far exceeding their apparent worth. I never fully blamed Arthur. He was who he was. A man grappling with his own demons, his own loneliness, his own flawed moral compass. But I did, and still do, blame myself for staying when every instinct screamed for me to leave, for choosing the suffocating silence of complicity when I should have found the courage to speak my truth, to defend my own boundaries, for betraying a sacred sisterhood, the unwavering loyalty of a true friend, for the fleeting, conditional touch of a man who, in the end, never saw me as anything more than a temporary escape from his own grief, a malleable object for his own desires. So, this is the wisdom I've salvaged from the wreckage. If someone offers to save you in the shadows, in secret, be acutely aware that it might be your soul, your autonomy. They are subtly, artfully, attempting to steal. If someone lavishes you with everything you think you desire, but demands your silence, your unquestioning compliance as payment, then you must urgently ask yourself what vital part of yourself you are truly trading away. And never, ever, under any circumstances, betray the one person, the true friend, the sister of your heart, who would have stood by you, fought for you, through any fire, because the fleeting, intoxicating price of lust, of validation sought in the wrong places, is laughably insignificant compared to the devastating, enduring cost of losing yourself, of severing the bonds of genuine love and loyalty. Thank you for listening to my story. Now, I truly want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this? Drop a comment below. Let's create a space for honest conversation. Do you think I was solely to blame from the outset? Or do you believe Arthur, with his power and experience, knew precisely the game he was playing? Was it a calculated manipulation or a complicated collision of two lonely souls? There are no easy answers here. Don't forget to like this video, share it if it resonated with you, and please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support is what keeps this channel alive and allows these vital, often difficult stories to be told. Until next time, stay true to yourselves and be kind to one another.